We told the Russians in 1991 and 1992 repeatedly and in writing, although not in a signed treaty, that if they removed the 400 troops from Germany and allowed Germany to reunite under NATO, that we would not move NATO 1 inch to the east. We've since then moved it 1,000 miles to the east and 14 countries. Not only that, but we have put Aegis missile systems which can launch nuclear missiles in Romania and Poland, right on the Russian border. The Russians, Bill Burns, who was the US ambassador to Russia at that time and is now the head of the CIA, sent a famous memo in which he said, if you moved NATO into the Ukraine, it is a red line that cannot be crossed. All of these doyens of US foreign policy were saying, if we continue to move NATO to the east, you're going to force Russia. Russia's been invaded 3 times through the Ukraine. The last time Russia was invaded, 1 out of every 7 Russians was killed. They have a sensitivity there. When the Russians moved nuclear missile sites into Cuba in 1962, which I remember well, we were in the process of moving to these underground bunkers before my father stopped us. But my uncle would have been forced, if they hadn't removed them, would have been forced to invade Cuba. And we need to put ourselves in the Russians' shoes and actually understand. My uncle always said, you have to put yourself in your adversary's shoes.
This is my video update from Limassol, Cyprus on this Sunday midday. And right now I am in Old Town Limassol. I'm sitting right in front of the medieval castle where Richard the Lionheart married Berengaria of Navarre, and she was crowned Queen of England. It happened at this medieval castle in Old Town Limassol. And around this castle, all around the castle, are cafes and restaurants. So it's a nice place to spend a Sunday morning. So let's talk about some news. And let's start things off with Budanov, the military intel official who a couple of weeks ago gave various interviews to Collective West media as well as Ukraine media, and he said, well, he hinted that he was the guy that gave the orders for the terrorist attacks on Russian territory, and he was the guy that gave the orders. He was the one behind the assassination of Russian journalists and various other officials and politicians. He was the one that was behind all of this stuff. At least that's what he hinted in the various TV and media interviews he gave a couple of weeks ago. And in the video that I did a couple of weeks ago, where I was talking about Budanov taking credit for all of these terrorist and assassination strikes against Russia, I said that the Russians are going to get this guy. I said that 2 weeks ago, and he has now gone missing. And many analysts believe that Budanov may have been inside the GUR, the intelligence office building in Kiev, when the Russians hit this building, and there was some sort of underground bunker, and the Russian missile hit this bunker, and there are many people that believe that Budanov was in the building at the time when the Russians hit it, so maybe he's injured, maybe he was killed, maybe he was not at that building. This is all just a rumor, but Budanov has gone missing. Now, yesterday there were a lot of rumors on the interwebs claiming that Ukraine is preparing a funeral for a very high-level official, and many people were speculating that that high-level official is Budanov, and they even started to circulate this very interesting photo of Budanov claiming that he has been killed and that this funeral is indeed for him. Now, this could be a psyop. This could be a complete psyop. It could be a psyop by the Russians. It could be a psyop by the Ukrainians. It could be a psyop from the Collective West. Maybe Budanov is putting out this information as some sort of psyop. I don't know. All I'm saying is that this photo was circulating around the interwebs. with the rumor that Budanov may be the person who is going to be buried in the next few days. We don't know, but there was a statement attributed to Budanov a couple of days ago where a Ukraine media channel claims that Budanov told them that psychologically Crimea has been captured by the Ukraine military. Now, Budanov, 6 months ago, he made the prediction that come June, Crimea would be in the hands of the Zelensky regime. The Ukraine military will have captured Crimea. That's what Budanov predicted 6 months ago. And according to this Ukraine media publication, they got a statement from Budanov where Budanov said, yeah, I predicted that in 6 months Ukraine would capture Crimea, but what I actually meant is that in 6 months Ukraine would psychologically capture Crimea, which according to the statement attributed to Budanov is just as good as capturing Crimea in reality. Psychologically is just as good as capturing Crimea in reality. Psychologically, we have taken Crimea. As a soldier, I would say that this is sometimes more important than actual clashes with the enemy. This is the unconditional victory of our army. We will go into military textbooks. That is a statement attributed to Budanov from the other day. Did Budanov really make this statement? Who knows? Who knows? This wasn't a TV appearance. This wasn't a video. This was just a written statement given to this Ukraine media publication, and they published it. Once again, maybe part of a psyop is what we're looking at. But yeah, they've captured Crimea psychologically, according to the statement attributed to Budanov. Budanov loved the media. He loved the TV appearances. He loved all of that stuff. So the fact that we haven't seen him on TV in like a week, I don't know. That's very, very strange for someone like Budanov, who absolutely loves the media spotlight. And then they come up with this strange written statement, which they say Budanov made about psychologically capturing Crimea. Something doesn't feel right. So another person that has gone missing and then reappeared in a 30-second video behind a desk at some sort of science exhibition in Odessa is Zaluzhny. And allegedly, Zaluzhny made a statement yesterday claiming that Ukraine should not go on a big counteroffensive because Ukraine needs more weapons and it definitely needs F-16s. Now, this statement has been attributed to Zaluzhny. Once again, we don't know if this is the real Zaluzhny. We don't know if this is the Zaluzhny in that video from a few days ago. And if that was the real Zaluzhny in the video a few days ago, we don't know if this is if this statement now is just part of some sort of PR team that's going to come up with statements attributed to Zaluzhny. You know, we don't know who or what Zaluzhny is anymore. He may be the real Zaluzhny that was commanding the Ukrainian forces. He may be a Zaluzhny lookalike or a clone. He may be a bunch of people now sitting at a desk in London or DC coming up with quotes. we just don't know anymore. We have no idea. But this thing that we're going to now call Zaluzhny, he said that there should be no big offensive. Ihor Zovka, who's the deputy head of the Ukrainian president's office, he gave an interview to the Times the other day, and he said, and I quote, "If you want to launch a successful counteroffensive, you need everything you have at your disposal, including artillery, armored vehicles, and tanks. So we probably don't have enough of them. That's what he told the Times. In other words, this official in the Zelensky government told the Times that Ukraine is not ready for a summer, spring, fall spring offensive. They're not ready. So Zelensky, or the people who now claim to be Zelensky, they come up with a statement and they say that that the commander of the Ukraine military is against an offensive because they need F-16s. Now you have this this high-level official in the Zelensky regime telling the Times, we can't go on an offensive. We need more weapons. Now, Zelensky, in the interview he gave to the Wall Street Journal the other day, he said that Ukraine is absolutely ready for an offensive. They're ready to go, but they need weapons. That is what he told the Wall Street Journal. I talked about this in my video yesterday. Zelensky said that Ukraine is absolutely ready for the big counteroffensive. They just need a whole new army and new weapons and lots of weapons and the U.S. military to come into Ukraine and to go on the offensive. I'm exaggerating a bit, but that's pretty much what Zelensky said. He said we're ready, but we need all of this stuff. Otherwise, we can't go on the offensive. Zelensky also said some other interesting things as he was speaking to the Wall Street Journal. He said that that Biden has been very good for Ukraine. He said that he fears a Trump win in 2024. In a situation where we have support, you are afraid of change. To be honest, when we talk about changing the administration in the US, I feel the same as any other person. You want changes that will bring improvement, but it can be the other way around. So Zelensky is telling the Wall Street Journal that he is afraid of a Biden loss and a Trump presidency because he knows that if Trump were to win in 2024, at least Trump has hinted at the fact that he would stop the money going to Ukraine. And that would mean that the Zelensky government and the Ukraine military would collapse very, very quickly once the money from the United States stopped. And that is what Zelensky is afraid of. Of course, Biden has been very good for the Zelensky regime. Of course it has. Under Biden, Zelensky has been able to purchase 50 homes because of Bidenopolis, Greece's favorite son. So yeah, Zelensky is worried that if the war drags on until 2024 and Biden loses, well then Zelensky is in big, big trouble. No more homes for Zelensky if Trump follows through on his campaign promises. But Zelensky also said in this Wall Street Journal interview, and I think this is the best part of that interview, Zelensky said that Ukraine needs 50 Patriot batteries so that they can go on the big offensive and defeat Russia. 50 Patriot batteries. That's like something like $50 billion. If you say that a Patriot system is something like $1.1 billion, that is like $55 billion that Zelensky says he needs from the United States. I don't think all of Europe has 50 Patriot battery systems. Like in all of Europe, I don't think you have 50 Patriot batteries. Or maybe you just have 50 Patriot batteries throughout all of Europe. And now Zelensky is saying, I want 50 Patriot batteries. That's what I need to get things going. Plus all the missiles as well. It's not only the batteries, he needs the missiles as well. So that is what Zelensky told the Wall Street Journal. 50 Patriot batteries would be needed to sufficiently protect Ukraine's cities and its troops on the battlefield ahead of the much touted counteroffensive. Launching the operation without such air defenses means a large number of soldiers will die, Zelensky said. Everyone knows perfectly well that any counteroffensive without air superiority is very dangerous, Zelensky said. So that is the new ask from Zelensky. That's the new ask. Oh man. Oh, what else? What else did Zelensky say? Oh, Zelensky said he's going to pick a fight with world leaders that don't support the sanctions against Russia. Okay, Zelensky's going to pick a fight with about 80% of the world leaders, like the fight he picked with Vucic the other day in Moldova. He's going to pick a fight with world leaders that refuse to sanction Russia and refuse to give him money so he can buy some more homes. I need some more homes. You don't want to give me homes? I pick fight with you. So Zelensky said that as well. A public fight. He said he's going to pick a public fight with world leaders that refuse to support him. What did the Prime Minister of Luxembourg show to Zelensky? Do to Zelensky? What? Just, yeah. I pick fight with people who don't support me. I pick fight if you do not give me money. Oh boy. And Zelensky also said that he's not going to go to the NATO conference in Vilnius unless he gets assurances that Ukraine is going to be in NATO. If Ukraine doesn't get into NATO, if Zelensky doesn't get assurances that Ukraine's going to get into NATO, he's not going to go to the conference. First of all, Ukraine has no business attending the NATO conference in Vilnius because Ukraine is not a part of NATO. So let's start from there. But if Ukraine doesn't get an invite to join NATO, then Zelensky's not going to show up. He's going to boycott the Vilnius NATO conference. Even Kaja Kallas, even the Prime Minister of Estonia, who's been super hawkish for this conflict, and she's been a huge Zelensky supporter at the conference in Singapore, the security conference that's taking place in Singapore. Kaja Kallas said Ukraine cannot join NATO while it's in a conflict. She said the North Atlantic Alliance summit in Vilnius will support the aspirations of Kiev. The aspirations, that's what they're going to support, which I find to be a very interesting choice of words from the Estonian Prime Minister. Keep in mind, Kaja Kallas has been a huge supporter of Zelensky. And she's telling Zelensky, you're not getting into NATO. It's just not going to happen. That is what Kaja Kallas said at the Singapore conference, the security conference, that is taking place right now. And we'll get to that conference actually in a bit because Jungle Joseph Borrell said some very interesting things at this conference in Singapore. But before we get there, let's talk about a Washington Post article which claims that the weapons used in the Belgorod attack that took place a couple of weeks ago, those weapons were indeed Western weapons, American weapons. The Washington Post has confirmed this. The use of NATO arms for attack in Russia raises doubt about Kiev's control. The U.S. and its Western allies have consistently expressed opposition to the use of Western arms by Ukraine in attacks on Russian territory. They also urge Kiev to carefully track the billions of dollars worth of weapons that have flowed into the country, the Washington Post reported. So remember when John Kirby, when this incursion into Russian territory happened, and all of these weapons were destroyed by the Russian military, and then the Russian Ministry of Defense put out photos of these weapons, and John Kirby came out and said, yeah, you know, these are probably not American weapons. This is probably Russian propaganda, and we're not sure that Western weapons were used in this attack in Belgorod, and we've gotten assurances from Kiev that they will not use Western weapons to attack Russia. Remember all those statements from Kirby 2-3 weeks ago? Well, Now we know from the Washington Post that the weapons used in this attack on Russian territory were indeed Western weapons. And this line from the article, from the Washington Post article, where the U.S. urges Kiev to carefully track the billions of dollars worth of weapons that have flowed into the country. That line is, oh man, I have no more words for the level of propaganda and lies that we're getting from collective West media and publications like the Washington Post. The U.S. is urging Kiev to track the weapons, carefully track the weapons, make sure they don't go to the black market, make sure they're not sold onto the black market, or make sure that the weapons don't end up in, like, I don't know, Mexico. Oh boy. So now we have the truth. We have the truth, and that is that U.S. weapons were indeed used in Belgorod, in this incursion into Belgorod. And we have an article via the Express talking about Ukraine's big counteroffensive that offends me and you and offends everybody in the world. They are claiming that the big offensive could be a blitzkrieg into Russian territory like Belgorod. And the Express article has the title, How Ukraine Blitzkrieg Will Tear Putin's Forces to Ribbons, Lieutenant Colonel Stuart Crawford. One possible direction for a counteroffensive by the Ukrainian forces could be old Russian territory, according to British military analyst Stuart Crawford. In an interview with the Express newspaper, he called such an option a left hook, considering it the riskiest, but avoiding a direct attack on prepared Russian positions. The military expert believes that the AFU would attack the Belgorod region, then turn south and flank the Russian fortifications. Interesting plan, according to Lieutenant Colonel Stuart Crawford. Invade Russia via Belgorod, tear Putin's forces into ribbons, and then move south to flank the Russian forces. That's an interesting counter-offensive plan from the lieutenant colonel. That is what the Express is reporting. Let's now talk about Jungle Joseph Borrell and the statements he made at the security conference in Singapore. So, Joseph Borrell, he said that the European Union has spent upwards of 700 billion euros in this Ukraine debacle. Now, let me clarify a bit as to what Borrell was talking about when he throws the number 700 billion out there. Now, in the video I made yesterday, I talked about the Economist study and the Business Insider article. I'm going to stop talking. There's music here, so I'm going to lower the audio so I don't get a strike. Okay, I think we're all right now. You have to be careful with the music in the background because they take your video down if the algos catch the music. So Borrell, what were we saying? Borrell, 700 billion. So in the video I made yesterday, I talked about the Business Insider article where it talks about how Russia is only spending something like 67 billion on this special military operation, and it's running a very efficient conflict from an expense, a military expense, a budget standpoint. It's running a very efficient war, and Business Insider had to admit that this is a conflict that Putin is conducting, and he's just not spending that much as he's conducting this conflict. And Borrell, at the Shangri-La Security Conference in Singapore, he said that the European Union has spent 700 billion in indirect funding for Ukraine, indirect expenditures related to this conflict. And let me read you what Borrell said here, because when he means indirect spending, he's not talking about military aid and weapons and just money handed to the Zelensky regime. That's extra. That's extra. That's on top of the 700 billion. Here's what Borrell said. Here's his exact quote. If you include the support that the European governments have made to pay in order to help their families and firms face the high prices of electricity, food, the subsidies to our people in order to face the consequences of this war is 700 billion euros, 10 times more than the support for Ukraine, which shows the consequences of this war are not reduced to what's happening in the Ukraine, but to the shockwaves that the war has been sending all around the world. In other words, what Borrell is saying is that because of the EU's 10 sanctions packages, soon to be 11 sanction packages, the EU has had to spend an additional 700 billion on top of the direct funding, indirect 700 billion in subsidies and stuff like that to EU businesses, EU families, whatever. They've had to spend an additional 700 billion because of their bonehead sanctions. Now, some people are arguing on the interwebs that this 700 billion is budgeted and it hasn't all been spent at the moment, so it's not really 700 billion that the EU has spent up until today. It's budgeted for further out in the future, but that doesn't change the fact that the EU, whether they've spent a portion of this 700 billion or they're going to spend the bulk of this 700 billion in a year or two out, doesn't make a difference. It's still 700 billion. And usually when governments and institutions are budgeting stuff, it's usually a lot more than what they budget. So expect this 700 billion to be something like, I don't know, 900 billion when all is said and done. So it's not good. And this is indirect. Indirect. This is not taking into account all of the military aid and Zelensky's homes and stuff like that. This is all indirect spending. So that is what Jungle Joseph told all of those in attendance at the security conference in Singapore, all because of their bonehead sanctions. And he was proud of it. You know, it's like Jungle Joseph is almost proud of the fact that the EU has to now subsidize businesses and families and food and electricity and stuff like that. He's almost like proud of it. I'm proud that I'm destroying the European Union, which I guess was probably the orders that he received. You know, Borrell and Van der Crazy, their orders probably were to deindustrialize Europe. And so I guess if you look at it from that angle, Borrell is proud because he's done a good job of deindustrializing Europe. First and foremost, Germany. And AfD is rising in the polls in Germany. I've been seeing a lot of different analysis as to where the political parties stand in Germany at the moment. And I think AfD is approaching something like 20% support, somewhere around there, which would make AfD the second biggest party in Germany. And AfD is against the war. They're against the reckless spending. They're against the industrialization. So that's some big news coming out of Germany. Big changes appear to be taking place in Germany. The German people are not happy with Schultz, and they're not happy with this deindustrialization path that Germany has taken. So let's do some clown worlds. I've got 2 clown worlds as we walk around. Richard the Lionheart's medieval castle, well, where he got married. It's a beautiful area. Very, very nice area. So let's talk about the first clown world. And the first clown world comes out of the Netherlands. The WEF leader, Mark Rutte, Prime Minister of the Netherlands. And Mark Rutte, he said that his cabinet cannot resign, cannot fall, because if his cabinet were to fall, then that would mean that, well, if his cabinet cannot fall because it cannot fall in a time of war. That's the exact quote. So I'm getting this from a Google Translate, and it's coming from an article on nos.nl. According to Rutte, a fall of the cabinet is irrational in times of war. And he added, if we leave the cabinet now, we can forget about it in the next election. We won't. So Rutte's government appears to have a few bumps and appears to be a bit shaky. And according to this article on nos.nl, Rutte pulled a Baerbock. Remember when Baerbock said, we are at war with Russia? Well, Rutte is saying that the Netherlands is at war with Russia. The cabinet cannot fall because it can't fall during a time of war. His cabinet cannot step down during a time of war. It would be irrational, according to this translated version from this NOS article. So Rutte is saying that the Netherlands is at war with Russia. How about that? How about that admission from Mark Rutte? Pretty cool. One day I'll get a ticket and we can go in. Not today. One day I'll take you all in there. See what it's about. So let's do a final clown world here. I'm gonna need to sit down because I'm gonna have to read a bit for this clown world, coming from the Daily Mail. And the Daily Mail is reporting that Putin is toast. Putin is toast. All right, the Daily Mail. This is the beginning of the end of Putin. Moscow drone attack, Kremlin blasts, and cross-border raids spell doom for the Russian tyrant and could see the breakup of his country, experts warn. So according to think tank experts, the Russian president is finito, no mas, no more. Putin is toast because of the drone strikes and the incursions into Russian territory, the invasion of Ukraine forces into Russia. Putin is history. Let me read you what this think tank expert is saying, according to the Daily Mail. Infighting between Russia's military and Putin's warlords is now at fever pitch. Ukraine's counterattack is looming, and an opposition politician even went so far as to call for Putin himself to be replaced on state TV earlier this week. So is this really the beginning of the end for Russia's tyrant? Yes, believes Luke Coffey, an expert at the Hudson Institute think tank in Washington, who adds that Putin's demise will be swiftly followed by the breakup of Russia itself. I agree that this is the beginning of the end of Putin. The trajectory now is towards Putin being ousted and the further breakup of the Russian Federation, he said. Whenever Russia's defeat comes, Mr. Coffey argues, it will divide the country's elites into two groups. The first will be hardliners who believe the war could have been won if only they were in charge. The other will be oligarchs desperate to stop the bloodshed and patch up relations with the West, if only to preserve their own wealth and power. Either way, he reasons that Putin is toast and will end up dead or in exile somewhere. With the supreme leader gone, Russia's breakaway regions, awash with soldiers returned from the front line, will rise up against Moscow and demand independence, he says. Warlords may also vie with each other for control, with Putin potentially among them, if he can gather enough loyalists, and the Russian Federation will rapidly collapse. He adds, it will be unpredictable, and in some places it will be violent. I think you'll see uprising among discontented people. Moscow will have to decide which bits and pieces to fight for, which different power brokers they can engage with to keep their interest in place. There will be a lot of difficult choices to be made, and whoever is on top will have to keep an eye on their back. China may also stake a claim on territory that Beijing believes was unfairly wrested from its grasp by Imperial Russia, and Turkey may step in to protect the Turkish people spread out across the country. And the West is unlikely to sit idly by as a country of 6,000 nuclear warheads and stocks of biological and chemical warheads disintegrates on its doorstep. Wow. So, wow. According to this think tank expert, doesn't sound too good. Doesn't sound too good at all. Man. Putin is toast because Ukraine is invading Russia as we speak. You know, there are actual accounts on Twitter that believe that Ukraine is invading Russia and is occupying villages and towns in Russia. They actually believe it. And they actually believe that the Ukraine military is going to capture more Russian territory all the way up to the point where a government collapse in Moscow occurs. There are actual people, analysts, on the interweb, specifically Twitter, that believe that this is happening right now. Just to give you an idea of the news bubble, the propaganda bubble that they're trapped in. They believe that at this very moment, the Ukraine military is capturing Russian territory, and that this is the beginning of the end for the Russian Federation. I am speechless. I am speechless. But this is the propaganda that a lot of people are getting from publications like the Daily Mail. All right, everyone. I am going to end the video there. I think we've had a nice Sunday tour of the beautiful medieval castle in Old Town Limassol. theduran.locals.com. We are on Rumble, ODYSEE, BitChute, and Telegram. And go to the Duran shop. Pick up a No Reverse Gear t-shirt. Use the code Good Day. Get 10% off. I'm going to head over to a coffee shop, one of these cafes here, and I'm going to get this video up for everybody.